Good evening. The hour of 6 p.m. having come, but really only barely gone, uncharacteristically. The March 14th meeting of the Evanston City Council is called to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Nusma? Here. Councilmember Burns?
Here.
Councilmember Sefferden?
Here.
Councilmember Ravel? Councilmember Reed?
Here.
Councilmember Harris?
Here.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Here. Councilmember Wynn? Here. Mayor Biss.
Thank you. 8 members having answered the call of the roll, we have a quorum and are prepared to do our work for the evening. We begin with my announcements and proclamations, of which I have none. So the next item on the agenda is the city manager's public announcements.
Good evening, members of City Council. No announcements tonight.
Next item on the agenda is communications from the city clerk. No communications from the city clerk. This brings us to public comment. This evening, everyone will be given 3 minutes for public comment. The one person who signed up for public comment, Jeremy Venata, but I believe did not communicate with the city clerk, simply said that though he will be unable to speak, he wanted to express support for the Out of Space concert series. We now move to those who signed up to give public comment in person, beginning with Chris Dillo. Yeah, please come to the microphone and speak into the mic.
All right, thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I'm here to talk about the Margarita Inn. I'm sorry, I know it's not on your agenda tonight. But there's two things that I want to say, or 2 comments that I want to make. One is regarding preparedness, right? So we know that the Margarita Inn has been there for 2 years. It's served its purpose. It'll continue to serve its purpose. We've had multiple hundreds of calls there. Chief Edelton yesterday said that they cannot support that number of calls, that it is a drain on the community's police force, that there's already too few police officers on duty. There is no plan to understand how we're going to support the Margarita Inn now or even going forward. He said he's pulling resources away from special assignments. This is obviously very concerning. There's been no study. Margarita Inn has not come and said, hey, this is what we're going to do and this is what we need from you. The city has done no study to say, here, this is how we're going to need to support this. So right now, we're just going to go behind a closed door. We're going to rubber stamp it and say, hey, you're a rooming house, and we're going to let them become a permanent 40-room homeless shelter in the middle of the 4th Ward with no precedent whatsoever. I guess rolling the dice, saying, well, I hope it works out for us. At the end of the day, it's going to change everything in that particular area. I really feel like every person on this board, everyone on this council should have a vote, zoning should have a vote, and every person in that district should have a say in what's about to happen. That's one thing. Now, secondarily, I want to talk about the rooming board, or the rooming house component of it. So just very quickly, they're listed as a tax-exempt entity as a homeless temporary shelter. That in itself should just say it's not a rooming house, right? Further than that, you look at every piece of material from the city of Evanston in the last 2 years, and I'll just say a couple of them real quick. They have been given money as a homeless shelter at the Margarita Inn, a long-term homeless shelter at the Margarita Inn. November 9th, 2020, they were given funds as approval of $80,000 for a homeless shelter, operations, food, at the Margarita Inn. In January 19, 2021, there was a presentation done to this board describing them as a long-term homeless shelter. It kind of goes on. May 18th, Mental Health Board, 24/7 shelter at the Margarita Inn, connections for the homeless, operating a long-term homeless shelter. Everything that we called them, every dime that we gave them from 2020 and 2021 was as a homeless shelter.
15 seconds.
I'm sorry?
15 seconds.
Okay, so how we can conceivably say they are anything but is It's not rational. It's preposterous. If they need to be something else, fine, let's do it. Let's do amendments. Let's, put the proper zoning in place. And at the end of the day, let's call them what they are and make it legal. And let's not just hedge it behind closed doors and call them a rooming house and let them go. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my understanding that no one else is seeking to give public comment in person, and so we'll move now to our online public commenters, who will begin with Christine Clausen and be followed by Kent Swanson and Tim Pretch. Is Christine Clausen there? Looks like Christine Clausen may not be in the Zoom at this time, so we'll move on. Next will be Kent Swanson, followed by Tim Pretch, and then Darlene Gordon.
Good evening, Council. My name is Kent Swanson. I'm a resident of the 3rd Ward and longtime Evanstonian. I am speaking today in favor of the Out of Space concert series, which is, I believe, a matter at hand this evening. I think it has been a great asset to the community, a very well-run, well-organized event, and well within reasonable boundaries of noise and disruption. They support many local businesses and get a great deal of great publicity to our community for, around the metropolitan area. And it's an important part of who we are, I think, as supporting the arts and music in this kind of festival. And I think it's a great program. I urge you to support and continue continue to have it in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Tim Pretch, who's followed by Darlene Gordon, and then Mike Vasilko.
I'd like to echo Ken's comments. My name is Tim Pretch. I'm a board member at Canal Shores Golf Course. I also live near the course in the 7th Ward. I know the special permits are on the consent agenda tonight. And as a Canal Shores board member, I'd like to say how terrific of a partner Space has been with their out of space concerts the past several years. And we as an organization really value their partnership. These guys are real pros. The production values and performing artists they've brought have been first rate. These concerts have been very good for Canal Shores. They've raised the profile and awareness. It's led to increased donations, more golfers, and importantly, deeper community support overall. And we definitely appreciate the city's support of these shows. So thank you for that. And beyond the Canal Shores side, let's not forget that these shows also benefit the entire city of Evanston. They support numerous small businesses. I've met people that came from across the country to these shows, so people from Oregon. It's really been amazing. And they provided a much needed and still needed cultural and civic benefit. So that's our thoughts, and thank you for continuing to support the shows.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Darlene Gordon, followed by Mike Vasilko, and then Don Dirks. Looks like Darlene Gordon may not be in the Zoom at this time, so we'll move ahead to Mike Vasilko, who will be followed by Don Dirks, and then Doreen Price. I think you're muted, Mr. Vasilko.
I am. Thank you very much. First, I want to say I was very disappointed at APW when I was able to squeeze in a discussion about a handful of highlighted items from the bills and credit card lists that should have been at least discussed, if not challenged, by council members. No council members even paid attention. Tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, should have been discussed. Very disappointing. You're just not doing your due diligence, as far as I'm concerned. There's been an ordinance discussion recently about tree cutting on residential property, whether or not to charge people for cutting down their private trees. I wouldn't do it personally, but I think it's ironic when you consider the city recently cut down over 40 mature trees in the 5th Ward apparently without the owner's permission. So I just find that very ironic. Wanted to touch briefly on some of the articles I've read in the roundtable and in the Evanston Now, the one in Evanston Now, talking about having to spend another $5 million on Fountain Square to rebuild that fountain. Why should the city have to do that? Why should the city have to pay for something contractors, architects, engineers designed poorly or built poorly? And why do the residents or the city have to bear that cost? I'd like somebody to address that. I also heard recently about some dust up from our temporary city manager who, for whatever reason, can't provide information to a council member who asks repeatedly, I don't care what the document is, any council member should be able to ask the city manager, or in this case, the temporary city manager, for a document that's on file that maybe hasn't been made public yet, without getting all kinds of resistance and being denied access to information that is bad enough that citizens have a hard time getting information from the city. Council members should have absolutely zero resistance from city staff or from the city temporary manager. And I'd like to know how quickly we can get that manager replaced.
15 seconds.
Thank you very much. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Don Dirks, followed by Doreen Price. Is Don Dirks in the Zoom? Are you having trouble unmuting yourself, Mr. Dirks? I don't know why I would ask that question out loud and expect an answer. Oops. Well, Mr. Dirks is in the Zoom, perhaps having technical difficulties, so we'll loop back. The next speaker is Doreen Price.
Hi, Doreen Price. Good evening. And for this particular issue, it kind of goes along with what Mike is emphasizing with regard to respecting residents and also council members in terms of their requests. And I'd like to add, in terms of their financial disposition, I find it offensive that similar to a statement that the Director of Public Works said before about planting, naturalizing kind of plantings on the parkway, on having 60 people say that $400 fines, which the director said is necessary to discourage people from doing these things, and the actual, shock that people with low income are not being recognized. Again, this is happening with regard to the water. I assume that it's reflecting a director's disposition about how residents are behaving, and to make the assumption in writing that people who can pay don't is really derogatory for people who are struggling. And that's what we hear usually, like, we can't help you because that will just make you, if we help you, we won't be giving you a fishing pole or something. And we're having, just like the city says that we're temporary, it's temporary and we need help, or we need ARPA money, or we've gone through this time and we need help. Well, people right now need help. And to say that as of April, in 2 weeks, we're going to reinstate that unless you quickly get to somebody who's going to help you out and save you from losing your water, access to your water, that is outrageous. And with regard to water, since we produce it And we as residents provide the director with extra people for the water department. That was approved in the budget. And with regard to ARPA funds with regard to improving the systems. And again, reflecting the city people who are residents here paying taxes and whatever fines and fees and what they're doing. I suggest that we have water free and charge an extra penny or whatever to our customers to make up that $500,000. And then at that point on, have water free for everybody below a certain amount of water. And we know the high use or industrial use or people who are large estates. That means most people and most residents would be able to share from the same wealth that the city is creating, but
15
not
seconds.
necessarily passing down. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I just want to confirm that we really need to re-examine, and talk to the residents who need help and actually make it easy for them. Because I've gone through so many agencies, and I can tell you, LIHEAP is $300 a month lower than what I take in, which is not very much. So I have to go through Salvation Army, or the senior benefit card should count like it did for the ComEd. But somehow or another, we have to choose the lowest common denominator, and I think that's not right. And with regard to CETA, I don't know, but they're usually overwhelmed. Okay, but anyway, I just wanted to inform with regard to these other agencies, they're not that easy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's the end of our list, so we'll go back to those who were called on and were unable to speak. I believe that Christine Clausen and Darlene Gordon are both still not in the Zoom. So that brings us to Don Dirks. Mr. Dirks, are you able to unmute yourself now?
I hope so.
We're unable to hear you. We see that you're speaking and your Zoom rectangle shows you unmuted, but we can't hear anything.
Okay, well.
All right, sorry, there seems to be some technological obstacle here. Hold on one second. All right, I think we're unable to resolve this issue, Mr. Dirks, but please feel free to email in a comment which will be distributed to council and made available to the public. This concludes public comment this evening and brings us now to item SP1. Would anybody like to make a motion on item SP1?
I move item SP1, the ARPA plan and workforce development updates.
Is there a second? Councilmember Reed moves item SP1. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I don't see Paul here, but Sarah's certainly here.
Paul is online. He had a family commitment, so he's on Zoom.
Okay. I'm sorry. Were we gonna have a presentation first, or are we just jumping right into it? Okay. I appreciate one of the big things is I think we're trying to figure out. There are two things in here that I think are powerful. One is the the guidelines that are at the end here, the evaluation criteria. I think that'll be helpful, and I know staff wants us to kind of move forward on giving them giving guidance on a criteria that staff can use to evaluate projects. So I'll start with that. This is something I know Councilman Burns and I, and I'm sure others, had meetings with staff over the course of the week to discuss this. So a lot of the discussions we had are reflected here. One thing that I would love to see is with the criteria, I'd love to see a point value associated with it. So maybe project feasibility is worth a total of 10 points or 15 points, and team organization capacity is worth 5 points. And I'm just throwing out random numbers, but if we created some kind of numerical criteria that we could really judge them by, and of course it's subjective to staff, but it would give us better metrics on how folks are measuring up. So that's one thing there. Otherwise, really great stuff there. The last thing is with the ARPA categories. I think one of the things that wasn't captured is the having the new category, I almost feel like this image is maybe backwards, and that having that the new category should more closely reflect our committee structure. So when we go through the exercise that I think we should go through tonight, which Councilmember Newsma started at the last meeting, which is, okay, which of these buckets is going to go to which committee? I was hoping to see the new categories more directly, the new categories and the funding allocation associated with that to be more closely reflective of the City of Evanston committees that are already in place. And so I'm almost thinking the original categories is what's easier to work off of for us, and assign each of those and the associated dollar, allotment to a committee. So, for example, Economic Development Committee would have, again, I think the numbers have changed, but let's just say $7 million overall, and that would go to Economic Development Committee to decide how the ARPA expenditures. So, those are my. I don't know if those are my comments for now, but I would like us to actually go through that exercise at some point. So I'll yield.
Did either Kelly or Paul want to respond to any of those questions?
I can respond to the first point. So with the investment evaluation tool, when we met together internally after reviewing the comments of council last time, we thought to let each committee really decide how they want to weigh each one of these categories, as opposed to trying to create a uniform system of scoring that may not work for each particular committee. So that was our thought behind putting the TBD with the weighting criteria. And Sarah, do you want to speak to the second point?
Sarah Flax, Housing and Grants Manager, to the categories. One of the challenges is none of the categories exactly match up with our boards, committees, and commissions, precisely. And in some cases, we have, we started trying to do that, but in some cases we have, I'm going to use the child care request as an example. That request includes...
If I can jump in, just as for
sorry.
efficiency of time, because if this is for my benefit, I totally get that, but what I'm saying here is that our Economic Development Committee, for example, could look at, could find a project that's related to social services, that's related to, of course, economic development. It could come up with something that's related to infrastructure, but has an economic development impact, and thereby that's why that committee is choosing to do that. And so I think by, again, why this, prism, if you will, was reversed, it would, one side it would be the Evanston committees, economic development, social services, whatever our committee structure is, and on the other side would be what the ARPA committees allow, or what, not committees, I'm sorry, the ARPA categories allow, and we'd have an allotment to each of our committees that, social services gets this dollar amount, HOD, or what are we, CD, what's the committee that we serve on? HCDC, yeah, HCDC. That HCDC gets a certain dollar amount, and we had that in the original structure, and I think that makes sense. And then, of course, every project that comes out of those committees that ends up on the other side of the prism would meet the federal categories. We just, filter it out through our committee structure, is all I'm saying. That way we can understand how much money each, committee or whatever is receiving.
Is there further discussion? Councilmember Newsma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have indicated in conversations previous to this evening that the plan as it exists in front of us is not necessarily the one that I have come up with, but I'm feeling like there are any number of different ways this cat could be skinned, and I'm willing to go along with something very close to what's in front of us tonight, because in the end, I don't think the result is going to change significantly anyway. So I feel like we are several months behind in having this discussion. One point I would like to clarify, and I see our sustainability coordinator here. I'd like to address our CARP goals and see to what extent we can accommodate them or not accommodate our CARP agenda, through ARPA funds.
Kara Pratt, Sustainability and Resilience Coordinator. Good evening. I've had several conversations with not only Paul and Sarah, but also with a number of you about incorporating CARP goals into our ARPA allocation. As I've mentioned before, the intention of ARPA is not necessarily directly tied to climate change, and so there are a number of different restrictions that we've had to keep in mind. That being said, the one-stop shop affordable housing retrofit program directly aligns with our CARP goals and originated out of the Office of Sustainability. In addition to that, there are a number of different goals related to water and sewer infrastructure that have to do with our CARP goals related to removing lead pipes and generally improving infrastructure related to water and sewer. In addition to that, based on your feedback, we've come up with an allocation within participatory budgeting to further examine what projects related to CARP might be eligible for ARPA. So moving forward, we're still open to understanding what that might look like and what our community members might want.
I had one question that had just flew out of my mind, so you can come back to me. Thanks.
Is there further discussion? Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, just want to say appreciate staff for putting in the work and getting this in front of us. I think this is now a document that we can, when people come up to us in the community and say, hey, we have a proposal we'd like to put together. We have, something written down on paper that we can show to people that's consistent, that will be consistently applied across all proposals. So I really want to give a shout out to staff for putting this together. We went from qualified census tracts having their own bucket of 4 million, roughly speaking, to zero under this proposal, which I'm really concerned about. And so I think at the very least, we need to add qualified census tract as a criteria, as a scoring criteria. And I would hope that each committee, weighted that as one of the top priorities.
If I can just make a note, one of the reasons we didn't retain that, but we can certainly put it in as a scoring thing, is in the final rule, they expanded the impacted communities, the deeply impacted communities, to be not just geographic. In the interim rule, they were really focused geographically, and now they allow a category of people or businesses that isn't necessarily just geographic that we can look at. And there's actually a case where we're trying to look at our childcare providers, which is beneficial, not on a geographic where they're located, but on the number and percent of lower income children that they serve. So we are actually going to have an ability, we think, to be able to identify a class of childcare providers that we can then work out a formula for assisting without having to try to underwrite the specific needs of every single one of them, which is a little bit daunting. And we're looking at measures like, are we going to be able to add childcare slots with our funding as a result of our funding so that we can provide more services and that sort of thing. So the geographic is still very important in many ways, and we can certainly put it in as a criteria.
Mr. Mayor, may I say something from
Go ahead.
Detroit, Michigan, please? Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city clerk, it's Paul Zalmazak, Economic Development Manager. Thank you. Councilmember Burns, I wanted to point you to page 61 of 585 in the packet. I think one way we could also address it more directly is item 5, addressing inequities and inequality. We can work in our committees to make sure that weighting is higher than maybe some of the others. So please keep that in mind if you hadn't seen that scoring structure in the appendix. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody who has not yet spoken is requesting to speak, so we'll go back to folks requesting a second crack, beginning with Councilmember Reed, who has 30 seconds left.
Yes, I just want us to actually go, so what we haven't yet discussed is the process in which ideas for, so if a community member or a group or even one of us wants to has an idea or whatever it is to address negative economic impacts of COVID or premium pay or services, what committee would a person go to? Where do they go to start the process to address that issue? And we haven't decided that yet.
Well, we had hoped to hire on our ARPA specialists, which we have not been able to do, that would take the lead on those matters. For now, I would say start with Sarah Flax as staff to guide you through either community members or council members through the right channels.
So Sarah Flax is the person that everybody's going to if they have ARPA.
That is correct.
Okay. It's a lot on your plate.
And your time is up, Councilmember.
Okay.
And Sarah's number will be on the ARPA page and all that information will be available.
We will make Sarah's information available.
All right, thank you.
I think people find me all the time. I think I have my number and.
I'm going to post your
very
cell
much
phone
out
too,
there.
just kidding.
So if I can just ask one last thing to wrap up so so Sarah is going to decide, so if again somebody comes with an idea, Sarah will decide which committee it goes to.
Sarah will help, yes, guide them through that process. There's going to be more to it than just that. There, maybe there's going to be some counseling as to what federal category this can fall under, maybe some refinements, maybe some information she might need from the proposer. But yes, ultimately, yes.
I would actually be very interested in also discussing in the participatory budgeting committee what types of things we really think would be ideal to potentially involve from that standpoint, because I think some things are very definitely things that we might want to consider engaging in that process to help flesh out, but depending on kind of what types of things they are and what kind of organization is proposing them. Some things are kind of straightforward. If somebody is coming and asking for money for a housing development, it's pretty much going to go to the Housing and Community Development Committee first, but there are going to be some other things that I think that won't be that clear cut, that it could be very useful to engage our participatory budgeting committee in that discussion.
I have a slightly different view of that process, but that's a conversation for another day. Thank you.
Councilmember Newsma with 4 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The quick question has flown back into my head, which was with regards to that one-stop shop program, which is one of maybe, hopefully not the only thing that will advance a CARP goal that we can get done with ARPA money, but what is the ballpark dollar amount of that program? How much ARPA money will we be looking to spend?
We haven't set that yet, but I think that we're working with Center for Neighborhood Technology and Elevate, and have asked them to put together a budget to help design and initiate that. And I'm expecting that would be ARPA funded. What I'm hoping very much we can do is pull in other sources of money for the actual retrofit work in addition to ARPA. But I think that ARPA really will be the money that will get that started.
Yeah, I mean, to make that project work, it's going to need ongoing sources of funding.
Yes,
But
it will need that over time, but we're going to work on that.
From ARPA, are we talking a couple 100,000 or $1 million and something? 500,000?
I'm thinking probably around $1 million. I mean,
Okay.
realistically, it's a big job.
It's a big project.
But it's a
and-
very, very, very important job.
Yeah.
And it addresses not just CARP, but I believe it's one of our most important ways of addressing environmental justice, because one of the most telling statistics that I've found is a 13-year life expectancy difference between our lowest income census tract and our highest income census tract. And you can't convince me that the housing and the quality of the housing stock isn't part of that.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, before we take the roll, would the clerk please add Councilmember Ravel to the roll, and then take the roll on item SP1, Councilmember.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes, and the ARPA plan has been accepted and placed on file. This brings us to the consent agenda. I've been told that we were asked to remove item H1 from the consent agenda, so that's pulled off. Are there other items that council members would like to see removed from the consent agenda?
A3.
A3?
A1 and A2, please.
A1? Okay.
A6.
A4?
So this time I have items A1, A2, A3, A4, A6, H1. Is there anything else? Going once?
Oh.
Oh.
I'd like to remove H1 just because, I just wanted to say something, but I can maybe just do that during call of awards. Or.
Did you say H1?
Oh, did somebody remove H1 already?
I removed H1 because
Okay.
the Logan family requested that it be done next time.
Oh,
So
okay.
it'll be done next time, and my guess is folks will want to speak when that when that comes
Okay,
up.
apologies.
Yeah, yeah, they're simply unavailable today, so it made no sense to do it without them around. So anybody for anything besides A1, A2, A3, A4, A6, and H1? Seeing none.
Move the consent agenda minus those items.
Is there a-
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves the consent agenda minus items A1, A2, A3, A4, A6, and H1. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the consent agenda, save those 6 items I read earlier, passes. So now we move to the items that were removed. Councilmember Sufferton?
Oh, I was just going to speak on item A1.
All right, well, let's see. Councilmember Reed, I believe, is the chair. Would you like to make a motion on item A1?
Oh, sure. Sure. I move approval of the City of Evanston payrolls, bills list, and credit card activity.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Councilmember Reed moves item A1. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Sufferton.
Yeah, sure. So every bills list has a lot of things on it and has things we may think cost too much or that we don't agree with. But this one in particular has $253.82 for dessert for the farewell party for someone who chose not to participate in the investigation on the lakefront. And I'm not going to stick my constituents with a bill for cookies for someone who didn't care enough to participate in that investigation. So I'm going to vote no.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Councilmember Harkaris.
No.
Councilmember Kelly.
No.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
We're voting just on this one thing?
You can pull the one item. If there's enough people that are going to vote no, that the entire bills list would fail. That wouldn't be good for the city. We can pull the one item if you want, but my intention is to vote no.
That was my question, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure exactly if we're.
I'm happy to pull the one item.
So I just think as a procedural matter, the item was not amended. The vote before us is a vote on the unamended item A1. If the vote fails, that would be very bad. I would respectfully request that someone on the prevailing side, which is to say the no side, make a motion to reconsider. at which point we could entertain amendments to the bills list that would assemble the majority required to pass the bills list, so we're able to make payroll and perform the other essential functions of the city without walking away from our responsibilities. But I think at this time, we should continue the role, I believe, with Councilmember Braithwaite.
Yeah, I'm aye.
Councilmember Wynn? Aye. Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
No.
With 5 voting in favor and 4 voting against, item A1 passes. This brings us to item A2. Councilmember Reed, would you care to make a motion?
Yes, I move approval of the BMO Harris. Yes, I move approval of the BMO Harris Amazon credit card activity in the dollar amount of $11,459.84.
Councilmember Reed moves item A2. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn? Aye. Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
I abstain.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor, none voting against, and 1 abstaining, item A2 passes. This brings us to item A3. Councilmember Reed, would you care to make a motion?
I would actually request that someone else make the motion.
Would someone like to make a motion on item A3?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move item A3, approval of the contract with Drexwood Partners LLC for lobbyist services in the not-to-exceed amount of $70,000.
Second.
Sorry, I didn't hear who made the second. Oh. Councilmember Nusma moves item A3. Councilmember Reed seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I'm not supportive of this, and that's why I didn't move it, because you're not allowed to speak against an item that you move. I don't know if this is, whether or not we need this is, I think up for debate. The city manager gave pretty compelling reasons as to why this may be useful, but I don't know if this is the time yet, as we do not have a permanent city manager, as this body hasn't even decided its goals yet. And so what are we asking this lobbyist to go lobby for if we don't even know fully what this body is quite set forward on a path to accomplish? Someone's phone is going. So with that, I would like this body to have this tabled until we have a permanent city manager in place to think through an actual lobbyist plan and to think through what are our goals that we hope to achieve with the lobbyist, with the paid lobbyist for the city of Evanston, because I surely don't want them down there advocating for things that would be opposite to the values of my community and the communities that elected all of us to serve here.
Councilmember, could I speak to that?
Certainly.
Because I, just in full disclosure, I've gone through a long sort of internal journey on this very issue. I think for a number of reasons, most importantly from a standpoint of efficacy, I don't think we really want a lobbyist in Springfield out there advocating on policy and trying to affect roll calls on bills on a regular basis. I think that's having been on the other side of that, I think there's a lot of that goes on and that doesn't really have much of an effect. What I do think, though, is that we need someone to advocate for us as we're trying to access state and federal funding. And when I say state and federal, I mean state funding and then federal funding that flows through the state, which is the way a lot of the recent federal funding has been flowing. I'll give you a concrete example. I got a call from Dave Stoneback a few months ago saying, "Hey, Daniel, I've prepared a letter for you to send our state legislative delegation explaining our need for additional support around lead service lines. And I was hoping you would send it because you have a relationship with them. You might be an effective advocate. And I said I'd be happy to advocate very aggressively for that. Is there a particular reason that you're suggesting we do it now? Is there an opportunity that exists? Did a window just open up? And he said, I don't know. And I said, I also don't know. But there is a lot of funding that's being made available right now. And if you look at the history in this city, we've tried a lot of different models. We've had in-house people, we've had contract lobbyists, we've had kind of nothing at all, we've had a team of people. We've done a lot of different things. But I think in the times that we have no help at all, we just lose out on opportunities that we can't really afford to lose out on given the ambition of what we want to take on. And so I see this not as like, hey, let's send someone to Springfield to go advocate for an ideological or philosophical policy agenda. I mean it much more, let's have someone go advocate for our parochial financial interests so we are accessing every resource that we can to accomplish what we then want to accomplish with it. Next will be council member, or did you have more, council member?
Certainly, but I'll let folks, and I'll come back around.
Okay. So next is council member Braithwaite, who will be followed by Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I spoke to this earlier today, I'm sorry. And the one question that I had was with I like the fact that, as a services, we're looking to partner with the diversity firm, as it was labeled in the packet. But when I went to try to find the firm, to look them up online just to see who they are, just for future uses, I wasn't able to find them. So it pointed to a firm it was in another state, but I was just curious to know who they are.
I can't speak to that, but I know that Dave Stoneback was involved in the scoring, and I know he's here this evening. So
he was there at the committee. I mean, he heard the concerns. And then the other question that I had was with our current staff person, Allison. It wasn't clear to me what is the distinction between her role as a legislative liaison and what this specific do. Although our city manager gave a very clear explanation, it was still unclear in my mind. Seemed like a duplication, I guess, is what I would share.
Yeah, I think one is about helping us do our policymaking work, and one is about going to Springfield and getting help from them to support our work. So I see those things as sort of overlapping words, but like almost unrelated tasks. Councilmember Wynn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I initially had the same reaction that you did to the term lobbyist because I wasn't certain what we would, how we would necessarily use someone in that capacity. But when I read through the summary of this and read the memo on this, I mean, I do see it. I see this more as intergovernmental affairs. Some people may think that's the same term. We did have an excellent intergovernmental affairs staff member here for five or 6 years. And it made an enormous difference in how the city interacted with the transit agencies, the state government, the federal government. We do have our transit mobility coordinator who serves that role, which we definitely need all the time. So I do see the need for an intergovernmental affairs person who is out there scanning the landscape in terms of things that we need to be tuned into, grants, being a contact person for the city. When we had our prior intergovernmental affairs officer, we had so much more information about what was going on. So in light of having had that prior experience, that was someone who was in-house. I support this. I think we need to do this.
And I would just add, I mentioned I've been on a whole journey on this issue. One thing that was persuasive to me is that this will wind up costing under half what was paid for an in-house person. And you lose something, but I think you actually gain a lot too, because you have someone who's physically in Springfield on the critical days every single time. Councilmember Nusma, followed by Ravel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in support of this proposal as well. I do think if properly executed, which I fully expect it will be, the $70,000 would more than pay for itself.
Councilmember Ravel.
Just a quick comment that it's in the memo, it mentioned that there would be regular monthly updates when the legislature was in session, and I was just hoping that those monthly updates would come to City Council.
Absolutely, I would say that's the whole point. No one else who has not yet spoken is requesting to speak, so we'll go back to folks seeking a second crack, beginning with Councilmember Reed, who has 3 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Yeah, I'm gonna for now. Oh, I'm sorry. So the firms that, okay, so the firms that applied are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 firms here for this. Is this who we vetted? Director Stonebeck? Manager Stonebeck? Interim Deputy Manager Stonebeck?
Good evening, Dave Stonebeck, Interim Deputy City Manager. And yes, we received the 5 proposals.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and I'm sorry, how did, I see that one council member was on the committee to vet these. How did we choose that council member? And why wasn't, I don't remember this being proposed to all of the council to serve on a committee that would vet the.
That is correct. Councilmember Sufferton was asked to participate in that, and we thought it would be good because of his experience as a lobbyist.
Okay. Thank you. I personally would like to hold this, but I'm going to vote no, I guess, on this. And I would like to see those regular updates, those monthly updates, to really see what value we are getting out of this, and and have us really think about at what point is it worth actually hiring a staff member who. In their description, it's understood that they're going to spend part of their year in Springfield, just like some of these folks, I'm sure, travel back and forth. And at other times of the year, they can provide, when the legislature isn't in session, additional services if need be, or focus on something else. So I really want to understand what value we're getting out of it. I particularly would think that most of our department heads, if this role is purely to help us find grant opportunities, and funding opportunities, I would think each department would have within their department or some collective source within the city the ability to follow the grants related to their own field and be able to pull those grants and understand how to access those funds. I mean, that's why we pay a lot for both membership in the Illinois Municipal League. We pay for professional membership for just about every department head in their department to be in various leagues that keep them on the forefront of what's going on in their industry. And I do wonder what we're getting out of this that we wouldn't get out of those services. And so I'm hoping to be delightfully surprised. So looking forward to those reports.
Councilmember Sufferton, followed by Burns, and then we'll go back to folks seeking a second crack.
Thanks. I just would point out that April 8th is the scheduled adjournment, so holding it would be unwise. And I would just emphasize this is much more cost effective than having an in-house employee, and I think it's just a really wise investment. That's all.
Councilmember Burns.
I'll pass for now.
So we'll go now to those seeking a second crack, beginning with Councilmember Braithwaite with 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
Thank you, Mayor. I was trying to pull up the packet. I'm less inclined to support just a lobbyist downstate, just for the host of reasons that were labeled. But Councilmember Nguyen did bring up a good point that I do see value in, and that's if someone's specifically dedicated to the intergovernmental role that we've had previously. So if we incorporated this within that, I see more value in that versus someone going downstate just to lobby on things when there's really no clear idea of what that would look like from my lens. So that's what I would like to do. And as well, I said it before, just who is this minority firm, and to get information that we can look up online to see what they look like.
So I think Ms. Gandersky has an answer to that latter question here.
So it appears that the winning bidder would partner with the Carson Group, doing business as Carson Group Solutions. And they are an MBE firm that is at least 51% managed and controlled by a minority, certified by a certifying agency within Illinois. I believe they were certified by Cook County. And they're located 11 East Hubbard Street,
Right.
Chicago.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but I tried to look them up, and the Carson Group that came up was one in Texas that did not look like a diverse firm. So if they don't have a website, that's fine, but I just was looking for a footprint and I couldn't find one online.
That's the information that they submitted.
Councilmember Nusma with 4 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would the scope of work of this lobbyist be limited to the legislative branch in Springfield, or would they also be interacting with state agencies in the executive branch? I'm thinking of a concrete example in my ward where somebody who has some insight to the Illinois Department of Public Health might be useful.
No. So first of all, the answer to your question is the scope would not be limited at all to the legislative branch. In fact, it wouldn't really be focused even primarily on the legislative branch, though it would certainly include that. And I would just respond to this in the spirit of Councilmember Braithwaite's very important point that the scope would also not be limited exclusively to Springfield either. This is somebody. The point of hiring somebody is to manage our intergovernmental effort and be our eyes and ears with the various other governments with which we interact. I just think that there's a lot lost by virtue of the geographic distance from Springfield and the just weird opacity of how things happen there. That I've sort of highlighted that in my comments, but the scope of work need not be limited to that. Councilmember Burns, did you want to? Then we go back to Councilmember Reed, who has a minute 30 left.
Yeah, I mean, given even the questions that I think Councilmember Braithwaite has good questions, just wanting to see their website, and it seems like there may be something kind of incorrect there. If we can't even do a basic vetting, I hear Councilmember Suffredin saying that the end of session is April 8th, but I also wonder, given that the end of session is April 8th, what are we going to get in a month if we engage them today? And so would it really hurt to hold it, or is this kind of the best time to hold it given that session is about to be over? So before I make the motion to hold, Councilmember Suffredin, if you have a response to that, that will influence. But all right. Well, then I'm going to move to hold it until our next meeting, because I'd love to get more information about this group and really have a deeper understanding of the need. In particular, I'd love to see a contract come back as well, the actual scope of work.
Councilmember Reed moves to hold item A3. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves to hold item A3. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. This ends the discussion unless there's a motion to overrule the hold. Is there a motion to overrule the hold? Seeing none, this brings us to item A4. Item A4. Is there a motion on item A4?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move item A4, the contract extension with Safe Built for supplemental inspection and plan review services, and then not to exceed amount of $100,000.
Second.
Councilmember Newsom moves item A4. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Kelly.
So I brought up some questions about this that were, partially answered, but I still have some questions. So this is probably in excess of $100,000 a year for, a lot of which involves permitting. And I guess didn't we recently approve $150,000 to hire Baker Tilly to do an assessment of personnel? I mean, I'm only asking because I wonder if this would not be better spent. Well, at least looking at, is that accurate? We did recently. Didn't we vote to approve that? And do we know when that, is there a time frame for?
It'll be finished by July.
By July. So my question is, would we not be more effective in hiring somebody rather than farming out $100,000? I mentioned a lot of that, that I'm sure this firm does in essence fine work, but they're located far away. So I've seen myself mistakes on permits. And again, no fault of theirs. They have no way to know whether things are, for example, whether there's inaccurate information based on a property owner, for example, in town because they're hours away. And so I'd like to consider whether it might not be worth seeing the Baker Tilly report to then assess whether we'd in fact do a better job if we hired somebody, albeit for more money than $100,000, all told, but that we might do a better job and be more effective in serving our residents. Thank you.
Good evening, Johanna Neiden, Community Development Director. So we have tried to, years ago we've tried to recruit for this position, but have been unable to find anyone. This is, if you talk to people in HR, this is one of the hardest positions to recruit for. You need specific credentials, certifications. Often these individuals have training in architecture. So there's not a whole lot of these people right now, particularly in a market that is strong in development, because those positions might work in contracting. So it's always hard to find this position. The person who had been holding it, if you remember, Dean Mosca, had been here close to, I think, 30 years. He had a horrible accident and ended up having to retire. So we have been unable to fill that position. So prior to Dean's retirement, we had been using Safe Built because one of the things that we know is a big problem is when somebody takes time off or is on vacation, permits still come in and they still need to get processed. So Safe Built has always been used, even before I was in this position, Safe Built was used as a backstop to help with inspections. They can do inspections when we have inspectors out, and they can do plan review work. So prior to the pandemic, the plan reviewer was on site here at the Civic Center because we were doing paper copies of plans. Now we do digital copies of plans, so they're routed electronically, and that person does not come into the Civic Center. We have talked about that person returning into the Civic Center as staff has come back into the building. So we have not filled the plan reviewer in-house position. We've continued to use Safe Built because they can also, if that particular Safe Built plan reviewer that's assigned to the city is out, Safe Built will have somebody as the backup. So unlike a staff member who might take vacation, at one point we had 2 plan reviewers. We have 0. And those plan reviewers could back each other up, and Safe Built could also provide a backstop. So this comes down to making sure we have coverage with our plan review activities for building code. We just don't have that if we have full-time staff. This has been a better option. We've been able to add more staff if we need to when the permit flow gets a little heavier.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I guess, is that what he was? Dean was a plan reviewer?
Yes, he was.
And currently we have 1 plan reviewer?
We have 0 plan reviewers.
Okay, we have no plan reviewers. So I guess I'll be curious to see what Baker Tilly report says in terms of that, and I just wonder if we really want, if it wouldn't be worth us, right now we're making an effort to try to, we aren't trying to, we're just going straight to outsourcing, correct?
Right. So
I mean, I would
we've
much
had the
rather-
we've had the same reviewer for many years. So in many ways, he has effectively been a full-time employee for, I mean, he has greater tenure than some other people on staff in the plan review space.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather see somebody in-house doing this, just because, again, these are folks located not, sometimes hours away, and when I spoke to one of them, he's like, yeah, this is all I can do. There's no way that I could even drive over to see if, someone in fact was replacing an existing fence where they said they had one where there wasn't one. So I just, and I understand, I know then you go out and permit, but I think that we would do a much more efficient and effective, and we could scrutinize permit applications better. So I don't know, maybe that can't happen. I don't know if it's going to be modified. It's a lot of money. Again, I wish we could hire someone.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in the situation I know you're talking about, that applicant didn't give us the proper information. So
right.
We're only as good as, and there is no standard operating procedure to verify every single permit that comes in to make that particular
Well, there are
issue.
3 of them that I said.
And those are literally the 3 that we would not go out and physically verify before we review the permit. We would review it upon completion of the work.
I mean, but if you had in all these cases, residents were upset about it, I mean, there could be, if there was an application, you go over and see if they're saying, no, this isn't, I just think you have a better ability to ensure a more accurate process if it's in-house. But I understand if we.
Well, but then in that situation, you and I reviewed it, and I made the discovery that there was the issue with the fence had been taken down from an aerial because you told me about it, and so that was a little bit of sleuthing on all of our parts.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I guess, I don't know where we would go from here. I would rather see somebody in-house. I think we'll do a better job with it than, and again, they're doing a fine job for what they do. He says, well, we just simply cross-check the city code against the permit. That's all we do out here. And so, and then things fall through the crack, I think, much more than they would if it were done here. But, so I don't have a proposal, although I would rather see us doing this in-house, so. But, and I also am curious in terms of the amount of money we're allocating, what Baker, I mean, I don't know if we can hold this. I guess it won't be until, you said July, right?
If you hold it, you don't have plan review. So then you really will get a lot of emails
Or can
about.
all right, or less than 125,000? Is there a way to allocate?
The agreement ends, so this is an extension of the contract. So unless you all want to have more emails about permit process
No,
being
I'm just
slowed.
wondering if there's a way to do this, like $50,000, and see if we can't hire somebody.
In previous years, we've spent less than $100,000. So
I think last year was
that's why we put it as a not to exceed.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen, followed by Reed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Neiden, I wanted to ask just about the numbers of permit requests that we've had this year compared to last year, compared to, let's say, 2018.
I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but every year is a little different. Something happens that upticks something. We've seen more people, anecdotally, in the past 2 years take on those bathroom and kitchen rehabs, the decks and patios or fences, because they're in their homes and they're spending more time. They're also, again, anecdotally, we're seeing people do things themselves. So they're their own GC. So they're getting in the weeds on building permit processes, which we need to provide a little bit more technical assistance to help them through the process than you might get if you had a contractor who knows, pull this permit, fill this out. It's a lot of individuals who are dabbling as general contractors. So it's all sort of snowballed in 2020 when we had that horrible hailstorm with the roofing. Yes. Mm-hmm. And the roofing permits were out of control, and we had virtually no permit desk staff. So while those don't require permit reviews or plan reviews, it's been a hard catch up since.
Yeah. Well, I'll say to the rest of the council that I have a new roof as a result of that hailstorm. That we have used Safe Built before very, very, very successfully when we've had various staff members who aren't available, or we've had surges of plan reviews that needed to happen. My memory is when Northwestern was building quite a bit. we use them. So I don't, as much as I agree with you, Councilmember Kelly, that it would be good to have someone on staff, but if Baker Tilly can't get back to us by July, it's not possible. I mean, this is the season when everyone is putting in their building permits. I told my constituents at my January town hall meeting to get their permits in as soon as possible because it was going to be tough. This was going to be a busy year. So we need to have those permits processed. And if it turns out we can hire someone permanently for this, that would be great. But until then.
We do have seasonal help or some seasonal temporary short-term help in the form of a former plan reviewer who came out of retirement to assist. So that person is an Evanston resident. He did the job previously, so he has some experience with institutional memory that we gained from that. But he's not a full-time staff member. He sort of pinch hits here and there.
Right, but the permits are not going to stop. So we have to have the person there doing the job. Thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, just two very quick questions. One, what is the average full compensation, salary, full compensation for a plan reviewer?
I think last I looked, it was over 125,000.
So around 125, 150, 100.
I think, I mean, that's where the class and comp study might come in handy, is to understand what that should be, because my impression from looking at other communities that have a staff, that it's more, and that ours was probably lower. And that was the feedback I got when we had recruited for the position in the past, was that it was too low.
Okay. And then certainly I'm interested in the same data that Councilmember Nguyen, just to see how many requests per year for a solid period of time. And then certainly I agree with Councilmember Kelly that I think at some point, once, if we're spending $150,000 a year, maybe then it would be time to look at, whether or not we need to hire someone on staff and, compare that with how much work they're doing and whether it's feasible for someone. So I think we do want to keep track of that. And so, at some point, maybe there is enough work to just hire someone and it's worth it. So if we can figure out what that range is once we start hitting a certain amount, when it just makes sense to hire someone, I think we should just keep that in mind. Other than that, last question is what kind of, and I am fully going into this blind, I'm not super familiar with this. I've never owned a house, nor have I had remodeling done to the house that I did not own. But I am curious, is there a technology solution? Is there any way are there any cities that are using any kind of tech to cut down on the workload with these plan reviews? And plan review seems pretty labor intensive.
I think we've been trying to get as lean as we can. I think the permit software that we're soliciting for right now hopefully will offer some relief and timeline of things in terms of keeping track of process and timing for permits. I would say, this is a multi-million-dollar operation. Finding a way to cut costs where you're looking at life safety and health issues is always a tangled web, and you want to be careful about where you might be saving some costs for what you might be losing in terms of a human being looking at something and keeping an eye on plans.
Thank you.
No new speakers are seeking recognition, so we'll go back to Councilmember Kelly with 1 minute and 25 seconds left.
I don't have any comment.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Harkaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton? Aye. Councilmember Revelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, item A4 passes. This brings us to item A6. Councilmember Reed, would you care to make a motion?
Yes, I move approval of change order number 1 with the change order number 1 to the contract with Garland doing business, Garland DBS Inc. for the Civic Center gutter assessment and repairs.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Reed moves item A6. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to have a little bit of a discussion now, just as a preview of coming attractions in the context of all the work that's going on right now to keep the Civic Center functioning, all the work that has been done, eventual work that's going to need to be done. I know we're going to have a robust community engagement in this discussion moving forward, but Ms. Biggs, if you could just provide us with a big picture overview for the next minute or two, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. My name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. So we contracted last fall with AECom to do a feasibility study for the police fire headquarters in the Civic Center to relocate versus the cost of staying here. They have been gathering information, interviewing city council members and staff to determine what sort of footprint we actually need to have and what sort of things are deal breakers for the contract. They are in the process of summing up their draft report, which we expect to see in about 6 weeks, at which point staff will have comments. And I would expect, though, that the council would see that early summer, late spring, early summer. In terms of what's going on here at the building, we know that there are a number of systems that are at the end of their useful life, and some of them have been really well on the radar. We've done a number of emergency repairs on the boiler system. Last year, we started having water leaking into the building that comes from, for certainly, some of it is from failed downspouts that have split open, that we are working to get it replaced, but we're also working to inspect the gutter system to see if there's issues with the gutters themselves that need to be repaired in locations. The roof and gutter system and downspouts were installed in 2010. So that system is pretty well out of warranty for any issues that we might be having now. And then recently, last week or so, we noticed that there's a location where there's some brick. One of the outermost brick facade is starting to, in one location on the 4th floor, it's bowing out from the other underlying brick wall. We don't have very good drawings of when this building was built, and we didn't own it as the city of Evanston when it was built. But the staff estimates that it's essentially a masonry structure that has maybe 4 layers of bricks vertically inclined, and that goes all the way to the top of the 4th floor. So on the 4th floor, the outermost layer is starting to separate. Brick buildings of this age typically are not physically connected between the different layers. That's done more in more current buildings, but we don't know for sure that it did or did not happen for this building because we don't have drawings, but it's unlikely. And so we have blocked off with caution tape an area below because this is likely, our best guess is that it's caused by freeze-thaw action. Water has gotten in behind, most likely through a failed seal around a window or the mortar failing and letting water in. And so at this time of year, as you continue to get more freeze thaw, it's concerning that that would cause some of the brick to actually fail and come off the building, or if you have very high winds. So we are getting a fence contract to fence off a space around that section of the building to keep people in like a hard barrier out of that area. We do have inspection coming this week, mixing up my weeks. Later this week on Wednesday, we're having an architect and a structural engineer coming to inspect for the other water leaking problem. And we're going to have an aerial lift on site, so they're going to inspect this area as well and give us a good assessment about what needs to be done.
So if I could boil that down into a couple of sentences. We have a really old building. It's falling apart, literally. It's costing us millions of dollars just to maintain the status quo.
We haven't really put any money into it. That's part of the issue. So since 2000, when they started really looking at should we stay, should we move out of this building, we have done some very limited capital investment. We've replaced the roof in 2010 at $1.7 million. We've upgraded 2 of the men's washrooms on the 3rd and 4th floor, and we've refurbished the elevators. Our facilities staff has done some in-house stuff as well to renovate individual spaces, but, you know, even 20 years is a long time to go without investing in all the building systems that we have. This building is larger than our capacity. It's a local landmark, so everything has to be done in a historically thoughtful way. And we pay for that excess stuff, whether it's excess space or it's having a historic building or.
How much detail will the consultant's report go into about the costs required if we wanted to stay in this building? Knowing that really truly answer that question, you know, close to accurately would require a lot more money invested up front, but.
I mean, most likely they're going to do a look at the condition of the systems and then come up with kind of a square foot repair cost or replacement cost to renovate based on the size of the building. It's, so they'll get a good handle on what does this system need to be fixed? Does it not need to be fixed? And then they'll use kind of square foot numbers to round out their calculations. Which I think is very similar to what was done in 2003. It's just that information from 2003 may be out of date because it was developed based on the building condition in 2003.
Right. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly.
So, yeah, I agree with Ms. Biggs that part of the problem is basically from just deferring some sort of basic maintenance. Like, I think this gutter situation was discovered over a year ago, so it becomes worse and more expensive. So I think that has to absolutely be taken into account. Just want to say, I mean, if we can keep up with basic maintenance, I think we're talking about investing less in the building. I think it's really about staying on top of issues such as this.
I would just add, a point is that we're kind of, the systems that are failing, they're beyond a basic maintenance. And so we have had issues with the gutter system. Just getting people here is, I cannot undersell or oversell the labor issues that are going on. And then every time we get somebody here, the supply chain issues that are happening with materials, it's really turning every project into a little bit of an adventure as we start forth. We're never quite sure exactly what the bids will be like. Even if we award the contract, will the contractor come back and say, oh, I thought I placed the order, but now it turns out everything's delayed. So we're struggling with a lot of these things. And I think as I talk to other people in the engineering industries and the architectural industries, these are really common problems right now. The city of Evanston is not alone in this. And then when you couple that with inflation rising, it's really a struggle. But, when 20 years ago, some of these things might have been just like basic maintenance. But at this point, when we talk about the HVAC system, distribution piping that's embedded in the walls has to be removed because it has been so far from being maintained. So these will be pretty serious projects when we undertake them.
But for example, this was discovered, right, over a year ago, the
Yes.
issue that we're talking about now, and we've gone through 2 winters now, so the problem's been greatly exacerbated. So I think it's about really keeping up with, like the gutter situation, keeping up with it as quickly as we can.
Councilmember Reed.
I think I'm the last person. I'll just close, and please forgive me if I blinked and this was said already, but I just want to make sure it's clear. So this change order is for $200,000?
No, this change order is a time extension. They just weren't able to complete the work because of the weather turning.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns. Aye. Councilmember Sefferton. Aye. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris.
Aye.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, item A6 passes, and this brings us to call of the wards, beginning with Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember.
I'm sorry, 2 actual reports. First, thank you, Dave, Darrell, for the presentation at my ward meeting. just regarding the longer discussion we had at APNW regarding all the resources that are available now for residents who struggle to pay their water bill. And then I also had an opportunity this past weekend to attend the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program, well-staffed, just, given the pandemic and all the other challenges of a very cold, brisk day. Staff did an amazing job with over, I think, 600 students that were there. So to Audrey, Director Thompson and her team, another great job executed. Thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes, I'd like to announce my office hours on Thursday. Sorry, should have had this ready. My next office hours are Thursday, April 7th. I'm giving everyone a lot of warning. They'll be at Brothers K. We'll be back in person. Thank you.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My next office hours will be Saturday, April 9th, 10 to 12 a.m. That will be at Capitol on Grove. Next Fourth Ward meeting will be Tuesday evening, April 5th, 7 p.m. at Robert Crown. And I'd also just like to thank the more than 200 community members who came out yesterday evening for a community meeting. I appreciated the robust conversation we had on Margarita Inn, and I appreciate the comments that were made. And I would like to assure the participants in the community that comments have been received and are being. I heard the comments, and we're taking them into consideration. So stay tuned for more.
Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, the next Fifth Ward meeting will be virtual. After that, we'll likely try to go back to in-person ward meetings. That'll be on this month on the 31st, 7 p.m. We'll be sending a newsletter out shortly. And I don't think they voted yet, but I do want to, mark that this is likely to be a really historic day for the city of Evanston, and that District 65 is considering a proposal. And one of the outcomes of this agenda item being approved would be the building of a Fifth Ward school in the city, in the TIF district that we just created. And for those who are aware of that there was a foster school was closed down in the late 60s, and since then we've been busing several hundred students only out of the Fifth Ward in order to integrate our school system. And I think what's important for this body to acknowledge and really confront and take hold of is that we shouldn't put integrating our school system on the backs of students and on the back of one neighborhood. That is really up to this body to figure out how we can achieve an integrated school system by having integrated neighborhoods. And I think that has everything to do with public policy, especially as it relates to the type of development we allow in different neighborhoods. So really excited about this. Again, I don't think the vote has been called yet, but because I've been a part of the process, I think we have the vote. So I just want to acknowledge this historic day. I was also at the mayor's Summer Youth Jobs Program. It was a success. It was wonderful to see people suited and booted in purple blazers and nice fedoras. And these are young people that came prepared to interview at a lot of different employers. So it was great to see them, great to see the employers there. Great to see the city there and other partners from around the community offering job opportunities for young folks. So shout out to the Youth and Young Adult Development Team and Audrey Thompson and everyone else that was a part of putting that together. And I think after talking to her, that actually is their largest turnout. It was over 700 folks that were there, and I'm pretty sure that was their largest turnout to date. So congratulations on the job well done. I want to also make it clear that the city of Evanston did not cut down any trees on private property. The city of Evanston did not cut down trees on private property, and I'm more than happy to talk about that with anybody individually. To let you know what happened, feel free to reach out to me. And that is all. Thank you. Oh, and I guess this is a question and a statement, but I would have been happy to vote no on the bills list. My understanding is that the $200 was already paid by the city, and that the donuts and coffee were already in bellies. And so I didn't really understand what I was voting for. I'm happy to set a policy that if someone is not cooperating with the ongoing investigation, that we don't send them we don't pay for their farewell. But I felt it was a symbolic gesture at best, and unless I'm missing something, that's the only reason why I voted aye on the bills list. Thank you.
Councilmember Sufferton.
No report.
Councilmember Ravel.
Just to announce that I'm having a 7th Ward meeting next Wednesday, week from Wednesday, the March 23rd, and the focus will be hearing from representatives from Northwestern about plans to date for the rebuild of the Ryan Field and the stadium. It'll be virtual.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I just first want to acknowledge the tragic death of a resident in the 8th Ward on Brummel. I think it was this weekend or within the last week since the last time we met, who's an 87-year-old man who died in a house fire. And so I just want us to check on you. I mean, the gentleman had a spouse who also lived there, but let's check on our neighbors, especially those who are senior citizens. And, thank you to the fire department who did the very best that they can to ensure that the damage was as minimized as possible, although this is one of the worst outcomes that we can imagine. With that, I also want to, as always, announce that we'll have a ward meeting on the last Thursday of the month, which this month, I believe, is the last Thursday of the month. I don't know the day right now. We used to have a calendar on the wall right there. It was Wally's thing. We'll have a meeting on the last Thursday at 6 p.m. It'll be virtual, so you'll be able to find that information online. I also want to acknowledge, that the school in the 5th Ward isn't just a 5th Ward accomplishment, it is a citywide accomplishment. I was a kid who was bused from the 5th Ward to the 7th Ward to Orrington Elementary School, and I loved my days at Orrington and being able to walk down to the lakefront occasionally. But a school in a neighborhood is critical to the foundation of building a strong community, and the 5th Ward deserves its own school. And as Councilmember Burns said, that is now on us to figure out how to integrate the rest of our community, and I think zoning is the place to start as we are moving forward with this. With that, those are my comments for today. Thank you.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
So as soon as I figure out how to send out a newsletter, I will send one out. Please sign up. I'm looking to have a virtual ward meeting on the 26th of March.
Councilmember Kelly.
I apologize. I have to postpone this week's ward meeting from Thursday to next week. So I will send out a notice this week. I need to take the ETHS debate team to the state tournament this weekend. So I'll send out a notice of the ward meeting as well as several other upcoming community meetings this week. Thank you.
And with that, Councilmember Newsom is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss an agenda item regarding litigation. This agenda item is a permitted subject to be considered in executive session and is an enumerated exception under the Open Meetings Act as set forth in 5 ILCS 120/2A, Section C11.
Councilmember Newsom moves that we resolve ourselves into an executive session. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Newsma. Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes. And at 7:39 p.m., the City Council resolves itself into an executive session to begin immediately in the adjoining library.